We're going to answer this question before us. It says if sine of theta is equal to 0.3 and cos of x is equal to 0.6, find the following. All right, so here we have sine of pi plus theta. All right, if I have pi plus theta, which quadrant am I in? Look at this angle, pi plus an angle. What quadrant am I in? Well, I'm going to be in the third quadrant. The next thing you need to think about is, am I positive or negative when sine is in the third quadrant? Well, I know that sine is my y value, and in the third quadrant, that's going to be negative. Once I've figured that out, the next thing that I need to do is say, well, this whole thing is therefore going to be equal to negative sine of theta. Now, if I know that sine of theta is equal to 0.3, this is simply going to be negative 0.3, because I know that sine of theta is 0.3. And that is my first answer right there. So that's how I approach it. Again, there are other ways of approaching these types of questions. You might find that you actually enjoy drawing these things out with the unit circle, and that's perfectly fine as well. Lots of different ways to go about it. The next one's a little bit of a tricky one. It's tricky because we're dealing with complementary angles or complementary relationships, complementary symmetry. The way I like to think about these questions is as soon as I see pi on 2 or 3 pi on 2, or really anything with a denominator of 2 with a numerator of an odd number, I know that I'm going to swap that trigonometric function. So if I'm dealing with cos, I know that instead I'm going to be dealing with sine of just that angle. But now I need to think whether or not I'm going to be positive or negative. And to do that, what you're going to do is look at the angle that you've been given and identify which quadrant you're in. I'm in the first quadrant. Then you're going to ask yourself the question, is cos positive or negative in the first quadrant? And because it's positive, that means we're going to be dealing with positive sine of theta. Now, because I know that sine of theta is equal to 0.3, that means my answer is simply going to be 0.3. And that's it. That's how we answer that question there. So nothing too tricky about that at all. Okay, we now continue on. And just to clarify, you might learn this a different way, you might learn this a different way, you might learn this a different way. The thing with circular functions is there are just so many different ways of going about these questions. You mustn't think there's just one way to go about it. So if I'm showing you a way that you're not familiar with, do not freak out at all. Just do what you need to do to get the answer. As long as you get the answer, you'll get the marks. Okay, this one right here. What I would do here is I see that I've got two negatives. I would take a negative out. Negative, and then that would leave me with theta plus pi, close brackets, close brackets. I know that when I'm dealing with a negative angle and a sine, I can just take that negative out the front. And then once I'm here, the next thing that I can do is just say, all right, if I'm dealing with pi plus theta, pi plus theta or theta plus pi, which quadrant am I in? Well, I'm going to be in the third quadrant. And in my third quadrant, is sine positive or negative? Well, I know that in the third quadrant, sine is going to be negative. So that means what I'm going to be left with is negative sine of theta. Now, a negative and a negative make a positive, so that's going to leave me with sine of theta. And I know that sine of theta is 0.3. Now, I'm probably doing a bit too many steps there. Shouldn't take you that long to get that. But I'm just going through this nice and slowly, and hopefully by the end of it, you feel like you've got a really good understanding of what's happening there. So that's how I would approach these questions. I personally wouldn't draw the unit circle, but if you find drawing the unit circle helps you out, you go for it. Remember, there is no one way to do these things. There are so many different ways to do it. As long as you're comfortable with your process, that's all that matters.